How many gaskets was I supposed to put on this again? 3? 4? Whatever, I'll just go with 4. More gasket the better, right? It'll make this GMMK PRO super duper flexy. Yeah, let's go with that. I'll be using a polycarbonate plate because it is the most super duper flexy. The Ultra Gasket Mod will help dampen the sharp defined tactility of my Gateron browns. Now I know why Glarsis loves them so much. Oh yeah, I can't forget to send him a box of browns. I can't close the case because I put 4 gaskets in. But you know what? Form follows function, so this is A-OK. Whoa, look at all this flex. This is like a keyboard trampoline for my fingers. Why didn't Glorious just make the GMMK PRO like this from the start? Hi guys, I'm Scott K and this is Keyboard. Sorry for that exaggerated intro. No mean to offend anyone, but I did want to bring up some challenges with the GMMK PRO that drove so many people to do some crazy things, myself included. Since the launch of this much anticipated keyboard, there were 2 major qualms that many have brought up. One was how stiff the board was for a gasket mounted design, and another that the GMMK PRO sounded so dead and muted. So with that said, we're going to be looking at some solutions to this issue. Unfortunately, the solutions I have found are one-sided, which means there's one to help with the stiffness and one to truly bring out the best audible experience. Try to combine the 2 solutions together into one super solution, but there were some physical limitations that prevented me from doing that. Luckily, I have 2 GMMK PROs on hand, so you choose your own destiny with this one. The first solution we're going to be exploring is the silver GMMK PRO. Let's call this the GMMK PRO Flexible Mod. One of the reasons why so many people were excited about the GMMK PRO was that it was a gasket mounted keyboard. Gasket mounted keyboards deliver a more dampened, gentler typing experience. However, one incorrect notion is that all gasket mounted keyboards are flexy. That is not true. Gasket design is supposed to dampen, not so much create bounce. With that said, the GMMK PRO is still on the very stiff end of the spectrum and a lot of people want it softer. There were some solutions out there with PC plates, but what I'll be doing is fixing the aluminum plate version. Before we move on, let's do a quick stock typing test to get a good reference point. Now that we have a reference point, let's get started. As you may already know, the GMMK PRO is a gasket mounted keyboard. What it means is that the plate on the PCB assembly is sitting on top of the lower case, cushioned by a gasket in between. The one issue with the GMMK PRO is that the lower case is very shallow in design and does not allow for much deflection. When the upper case is also installed, it presses down on the plate like this, compressing the gasket and essentially taking away all ability for this keyboard to flex. This provides a very nice dampened feeling, but can lead to a stiff typing experience. The first thing we need to do is remove this thin gasket and replace it with something better with more density and cushioning. The gasket we'll be using for this project is a leftover gasket from my KBD Fans D65 build. The D65 uses much denser and cushioned gaskets that will help from bottoming out so quickly. Here's a look at the provided stock gaskets from the GMMK PRO. You can see how this thing is and how it really doesn't have the density to really provide cushion. Now, here's a look at the gasket from the D65. Noticeably thicker and also much denser as well. So this will definitely help provide the necessary cushioning for the plate from bottoming out against the lower case too easily. Once applied, you can quickly see how different they are. One is very thin and the other one is monstrously thick. The other thing we'll be doing is removing some gasket points, in order for us to balance out the additional resistance the thicker gasket will be providing. Essentially, the gasket is a foam spring, and the increased thickness will be providing too much support. So we remove the center ones and the ones on the side for the PCB, and this way we can achieve a happy medium from the plate bottoming out and the board feeling a little too stiff. Next, we're going to be looking at the case foam. The foam here is here to dampen the case, but honestly, the keyboard itself is pretty dampened already. It doesn't really need something like this. So we remove it and throw in a thin sheet of PE foam to allow for more space for the plate and PCB to move up and down. I will also be using this 1mm thick silicone sheet. This step is optional, but we do want to increase the space between the upper and lower case, and it's hard to get it even by just screwing down less. So with this, I'm making sure that I'm allowing for exactly 1mm of extra space between the upper and the lower case. All I did was cut out little squares and apply it to the underside of the upper case where the two cases meet. Now, addressing the biggest issue on hand, the plate. The interesting thing about the GMMK Pro is that the plate on the PCB is connected together using multiple rolled plate tabs to completely secure the entire perimeter. The rolled tabs not only connects but also adds additional stiffness, acting like a support rib. In addition, the light diffuser on the side also acts as additional connection points between the plate and the PCB as well. Then there's two standoffs in the center of the plate, further securing the plate and the PCB. This results in an extremely stiff plate and PCB assembly where there is no allowance for any vertical or horizontal movement whatsoever for the plate and the PCB. So we need to do something about it. This is where the saw comes into play. I'm going to cut off all the securing tabs and add a little something extra called flex cuts into the plate where the plate sits on top of the gasket. And bam, this is the final result. So yes, I spent my afternoon taking a little hacksaw and I guess putting my engineering degree to good use. What I did was first cut off all the rolled tabs and I proceeded to cut into the gasket points to allow for additional flex. With this, the plate itself should be flexing along with the lower gasket to provide you the softness you're looking for without putting 4 gaskets underneath and using a PC plate. Is it pretty? Nope. Does it work? After all the time I put into it, I would like to think so. This is what it looks like. I made sure to leave about 6mm or so to allow for flex, but not snap off. Now that all the tabs are gone, you'll be putting the PCB and plate assembly together by friction mounting with the switches. You might be asking, is that enough? Yes, and this will also allow for the plate to flex. We will also be taking out the plate foam to help open up the sound a bit as well. When all of that is said and done, you will see that there's much more space between the plate and the PCB assembly and the lower case. This allows for the plate assembly to move up and down. Here's a quick look at how much the D65 gaskets will allow for bounce and how the flex cuts now allow for lateral roll of the plate as well. Here's a look from the side and you can see how the D65 gaskets allow for the bounce and has enough density to keep it from bottoming out into the lower case. I feel like I could watch this all day. One thing I did have to do was add in one screw from the diffuser to connect one corner of the PCB and plate. This is because of the rotary encoder. Without, when you press down on the encoder, the entire lower plate will come apart. Now time to put everything back together. Place the upper case onto the lower and flip the keyboard around. Gently press down on the lower case to depress the D65 gaskets. Remember those 1mm silicone sheets? You can see how that works to allow for exactly 1mm of additional space all around. As with other silicone installs, I just use the tip of my screwdriver and my fingers to prevent over tightening. Once all done, here is the final result. Now you can see this nice little bounce using an aluminum plate and without going too crazy with the gaskets. This is another look with the keycaps installed. You can see that there is fairly good amount of movement, with about 2 to 3mm to be exact. You can also see that the entire plate assembly moves together, helping to keep the PCB from flexing too much and causing potential issues in the future. Overall, a very comfortable and soft typing experience. Remember that 1mm of extra height we gave to the case? It's so minute that you cannot even see that we did anything from the top. When you look at it closely directly from the side, you can see a very even 1mm line, which in my opinion doesn't detract too much from the look of the keyboard since it's consistent and even. Let's take a look at how this sounds. There you have it. In my opinion, the flexible mod and removing the plate foam helped to open up the sound a bit as well. Ultimately, this mod provides the flexible soft typing experience for the GMMK PRO if that is what you desire. Now, on to the next mod. As someone who places more emphasis on the sound of the keyboard more so than the feel, this one gets me very excited. It's because it's so easy and yields such amazing results. For this mod, I'll be using my black GMMK PRO and will be calling. Being a gasket mounted keyboard, the GMMK PRO naturally delivers a more dampened sound profile. That, and with a PCB that I feel like is somewhat thicker than most, and the intensely stiff plate and PCB joining method that Glorious has employed, it sounds even more muted than the rest. So let's do something about it. The GMMK PRO that I'm using for this mod also has been fitted with a brass plate. Brass is stiffer material and has a higher sound pitch profile than PC or aluminum. Some say that brass makes for a clackier keyboard. All true claims. But before we start doing any modifications, let's do a quick typing test to set a reference point. Still sounds pretty muted. Similar to the silver model, I started by removing all the stock gaskets and replacing them with the D65 ones. In this situation, I applied it to the exact same locations as stock, which means I didn't skip the side or the center locations. Then, I also kept the stock case foam in this case. We're not worrying too much about flex here, so it can stay. But what we will be doing is this: polyethylene foam. Polyethylene foam is literally the bag the GMMK PRO came in. For those that have used this, know what kind of voodoo magic it can do. So we start by cutting the PE foam to the shape of the plate, then cut out the holes where the stabilizers will be going. Then I use that as a guide and place it over the PCB like this. Then I take the plate foam, I lay it on top of the PE foam to essentially make a foam sandwich. After everything is lined up, I place the plate back onto the PCB and I finish off the entire assembly like this. And unlike the silver build, I'll be keeping all the tabs and diffusers intact and screwing everything together to create a nice and tight assembly. For this build, I'm using some Durock Palms aka pianos since I really love how smooth and clacky these are. Now you might be asking, Scott, if the foam is in between the PCB and the switch, how does the switches fit? Easy, you pierce right through it. The foam is thin enough to be no problem and it needs to be there in between the PCB and the switch for this mod to work. Now put everything back together. Don't need to do anything else, just need to put everything together as it was and prepare to be amazed. I know, right? Voodoo magic. They also call this the Jelly Epic mod because that keyboard uses a PE jacket similar to this to create its famously poppy sound. Congratulations, your GMMK PRO sounds one step closer to a Jelly Epic. Whether it was the GMMK PRO Flexible Mod or the GMMK PRO Sound Mod, I hope these tutorials will help you close that gap between your GMMK PRO and the keyboard that you are hoping to get. Once again, if you liked the video, please like and subscribe and I will have more content for you in the future. Also, I have a Discord channel, so if you would like to ask questions or join in a friendly chat with others, please follow the link in the descriptions. YouTube tells me that 85% of my viewers are not subscribed, so if you could please hit that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks.